The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Eliza Asmelash, and I'm from the IRENA Innovation and Technology Center in Bonn. Hopefully, most of you know IRENA, but in case not, we are an intergovernmental organization with 161 member countries. We support countries in their transition to the sustainable energy future and serve as a platform for international cooperation, center of excellence, and repository of policy, technology, resource, and financial knowledge on renewable energy. Our analytical work and our engagement with our member countries generates a lot of valuable insights, and we're constantly looking for more ways to share them. This is why we have launched the fortnightly IRENA Insight webinar program. Every other week, presenters from one of IRENA's team, either alone or together with their invited guests, will share the key findings from their latest work, as well as insights into opportunities, trends, best practices, but also innovative solutions to address various challenges. We aim to keep these webinars short, approximately 30 minutes, so we cannot cover everything, but we hope to give you enough to decide whether to delve deeper, and we will signpost further sources of more in-depth information to help you to do that. Today's webinar, Renewables for Refugee Settlements, Sustainable Energy Access in Humanitarian Situations, will share insights and takeaways from a study IRENA carried out in collaboration with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, assessing the energy access in 4 refugee settlements in Iraq and Ethiopia. The study identifies ideal renewable energy solutions to reduce diesel consumption and costs and provide the refugees with clean, reliable, and cost-efficient energy for their everyday purposes. It also presents possible business models to increase the uptake of renewables, as well as enable the participation of private actors. Our speakers today are Dr. Deribe Gurmu from UNHCR in Ethiopia, Emanuele Taibi and Akarshan Vaid, who are our IRENA experts. Their presentation will be approximately 20 minutes to allow a 10-minute session for questions and answers. Before I hand over the microphone to Emanuele, Akarshan and Dr. Gurmu, I have a few housekeeping items to cover. Today's webinar will be recorded and available together with the presentation slides on IRENA's webinar website. The previous webinar recording and slides are already there. The link will be shared with you in the follow-up email. All of you are currently muted and will remain so throughout the webinar. We would love to hear from you during today's presentation. If you have any question for our speakers, please feel free to send it through the question feature that you can find on the webinar panel. We will be monitoring the questions throughout the session and select some to be answered by our speakers. Due to time constraints, we apologize in advance if your question is not answered. You may also download the reports on which this presentation is based in the handout section. If you experience any technical difficulties, please try to reconnect by dialing in with your phone. You can get the number by clicking on the phone option located on the webinar panel. If your technical difficulties remain unresolved, you may write to us through the chat section, and we will try to help you. So without any further ado, let me kick things off by welcoming Dr. Gurmu, Emanuele, and Akarshan. Emanuele, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Elisa, and good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to those in the Eastern Hemisphere. So we have another well-attended webinar, and we will try to use your time with conscience that this is a short time to discuss a complex issue. So we'll try to give the essential highlights of the work that we've been performing in collaboration with UNHCR. So first of all, my name is Emanuele Taibi. I'm responsible for power sector transformation strategies at IRENA. Some of you might have joined the last webinar on storage. So we cover topics in the range of storage. In this case, we're talking about refugees, power system flexibility, and renewable hydrogen. So today's topic is a very important one, and is the result of a partnership that lasted a few years, resulting in an MOU between IRENA and UNHCR to identify and cooperate in the direction of finding renewable energy solution in situations of displacement. So A few words of introduction before handing over the floor to Dr. Gurmu from UNHCR Ethiopia. So first of all, the importance of the topic. So according to UNHCR latest figures, we have over 70 million displaced people around the world, of which over 25 million are refugees, and over half of them are very young people. Energy access is an issue globally. It's an issue that has been addressed with reducing numbers going down rapidly around the world of people that do not have yet access to modern energy services, but we are still over 500 million people without access to basic energy services as of today. And this is true also in situations of displacement. In particular, access to clean and sustainable energy can deliver quick returns in humanitarian settings, and of course, significantly contribute to achieving the SDGs. So as I mentioned, the work that we're presenting today is the result of a collaboration where IRENA and UNHCR looked at how the two different mandates can be complementing each other, and how can we work together in identifying the role of renewables and solutions for improving the energy situation in situations of displacement through renewables. And under this framework, IRENA's Director General presented the report we're going to give some highlights about today in December at the first Global Refugee Forum in Geneva. And we looked in particular at 2 refugee camps in Iraq and 2 in Ethiopia, from which we could draw lessons that could be replicable elsewhere. So our consultants visited the camps and had an in-depth assessment of a week each for energy situation in each of these during September 2019. And the final results of the in-depth analysis have been shared with UNHCR a few weeks ago. So before I go into the details of our findings, it's my pleasure to introduce you Dr. Deribe Gurmu. He has more than 25 years of experience in environmental protection and rehabilitation, natural resources management and climate change, livelihood enhancement, skill development, planning, monitoring and evaluation, and research under different titles and responsibilities in the UNHCR representation in Ethiopia, in the Ministry of Agriculture, and in the Ethiopian Institute of Agricultural Research, in addition to international NGOs such as PACT International Ethiopia and others. He has a background in agriculture and environmental sciences with a PhD in tree improvement, a master's degree in farm forestry, a postgraduate diploma in resource management, and a bachelor in forestry. And currently, he is serving as the head of energy and environmental unit in the UNHCR representation in Ethiopia in Addis Ababa. Deribe, the floor is yours.
Good morning to all of you who are at least west of the meridian, and afternoon the east. Dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Let me start by thanking IRENA as an organization, my organization as well, UNHCR, to have given me the chance to give a briefing on this study, without which we all have been here on the webinar. At the UNHCR, as said already, the UNHCR overview is that we have over 70.8 million people displaced, of which one is that over 760,000 refugees or asylum seekers or IDPs are housed in Ethiopia, coming from different parts of the world, in particular from African countries and the Middle East. These all are hosted in 26 regions, encamped in 26 camps in the country, covering practically the east, west, north, and south part of the country. An interesting point to this of this study is a Sosa camp, one of our camps, with a population of over 63,000 people, if not about 14,000 households, and are located west part of the country. Specifically, this study was undergone in two of our camps in Asosa, Tore and Sherkole. An assessment took place between September 22nd to October 4. And on those camps, we have already about 62,000 individuals, about 25,000 households, specifically about 40,000 in Tore and about 10,000 in Sherkole. However, the refugees in those camps may be reflecting an example of, if not an idea, how energy is really dearly wanted by the refugees, and how this study also relevantly very important for us, if not for us, for the rest of the camps all over the country. Today, over 87% of the refugees use biomass as energy for cooking. And also very small power of lighting, such as street lights, solar lamps for protection purposes. Very many interventions in food for cooking, such as clean cook, ethanols, and biogas, biobriquetting interventions, and very little electrification for communal kitchens, predominantly in the northern part of the camps, and very little in the two camps like Sherkole and Tore. The Sherkole camp, being one of the oldest camps compared to the rest, is still predominantly the lowest in the provision of energy. All refugees, I can say, depend on the biomasses, which in effect is against the environment, in effect entailing about the communities' conflicts over their resources, often competed between the two communities, the host and the refugees. This study, we found it is very relevant as well, as it comes as a result of, or a predecessor of, our global strategy. The global strategy, which entails the 4 objectives, vis-a-vis increasing sustainable electricity for communities, including the refugees, of course, improving access to sustainable household cooking energy, addressing the energy needs of refugees households from the onset of the emergency plus protractation, and also increasing sustainable electrification for all. In line with, we found it that thanks to IRENA, thanks to the cooperations of the two organizations, ideally, the findings also come together, interlock if other, complement each other to actually provide or give answers to energy solutions within the camp. Specifically, taking the two camps as an example, and yet spearheading or scaling up if things work very well. From the findings, we also observe that the energy development situation for the refugees are also varied, and there are different layers of development within the community itself. Initially, exposure to the energy is one, and exposure to the technology is another, and also exercising that one is another one. We found it complementary. This study also reflected that, which indeed is a true situation for the two camps in particular. And again, the study identified how blackout leads to a number of over-reliance on energy such as fossil fuels, which are often unsustainable. Fossil fuels nowadays in both camps, if not in all camps, a number of generators are being run by diesel, which actually taxed the UNHCR's expenditures, often more than millions, to light the camps, to light some institutions, to light some basic services and so on. And also this study, we found it that the lack of energy imposing risks, indeed, in all, if not specifically taking example, the two camps, I think sexual assaults as GBVs are by far exacerbated for the fact that the refugees has to go into the interior to look forward for firewood for cooking. In return, there has been some assaults, there had been some empowerment of the host communities over the refugees, where often SGBV and protection risks are compounded. Over and above, we found that this study is on time and very relevant as well, and indeed to respond to a number of issues like renewable provisions or the provisions of renewable energy to the community. Energy in circumstances often is defined as a cross-cutting. It indeed is cross-cutting livelihood, cross-cutting for protection, cross-cutting in health situation, cross-cutting in education, cross-cutting also for wash, cross-cutting for environment, cross-cutting across the nation. And why? The livelihood people need power to pump water, to develop irrigation, to compensate food. The protection people need energy to attack, if not restrain, the increase the protection risks that would have occurred into the refugees, without which protection could not be offered if proper light is not given to them. The health people need energy to refrigerate their vaccines. The education people need energy for students to study and do their homework at night, if not light their homes. Indeed, the wash people need energy to pump water, to supply the daily required water for supply, both for irrigations and drinking. And indeed, the environment people also look for energy, for the fact that if energy for cooking in particular, that pressurizes the pressure on the forest is reduced by alternative energy, then the result is reducing the number of trees to be cut and hence saving the environment. More and above, the nutrition people need energy for the fact that often there is a record where a proportion of the rations are being sold by the refugees in the want of fuel for cooking, which implicates the nutritional impact of malnutrition ever increased in some of our camps. More and above, the significance of this study indeed is not limited to one, but also to a section of things which I defined earlier. And the findings also, the recommendations we feel, the recommendations at household level, recommendations at the office level, the recommendations at the settlement level are also held and applauded from us. The household, the study suggests to provide cooking fuel, which indeed is a daily need, perhaps a nightmare for us. Often we struggle to provide, both UNHCR and its partners were efforting to do, but many challenges. Often a challenge that has never been met is a cooking fuel. The tricky part of the cooking fuel is also there is no single solutions which we found, but a mixed one. The suggestions from the study also emanate in a sense that the only thing we could provide at household level could be mixed energy for cooking, including the biomass, clean cook such as ethanol, and briquetting, which we exercise in the two camps. In fact, we admire also the study has depth into analyzing what is being used and what worked and what didn't, and indeed identified also ethanol and briquetting worked, and we might go for it together with the study group. At the office level, I think the measure cost, if although incurred by UNHCR, is to run diesel-run generators. And indeed, it has taxed, as I said, a lot of things which otherwise would have been used for other purposes. To replace this, is one of the suggestions we often found from the studies, not only of the diesel, but also diesel with mini grid, diesel with solar powers, diesel with housing systems, which in effect will reduce the expense of UNHCR, increasing the benefits to the refugees through providing clean and sustainable power to run the offices and to run house lighting and so on. At the settlement level, it also includes that the power is very important. The power for basic services, the power for school running, the power for clinical learning, which again aligns with our study, Global Energy Study, Sustainable Energy Provision of 2019 and 2014. We concur also that if everything goes well, the way forward could be to go with one of the options that we have. It is a time that UNHCR has to work with. The ultimate time that to work together is now. The UNHCR looks for the private sector, looks for the philanthropists, looks for the donors to work together. Perhaps a group like you could be one of the intentions where UNHCR trajectories is then move forward to working together, requiring a sustainable support than any ever that we have faced. And I hope with this we can work together and develop this, and reality will bring this study into reality together with you. I hope we can make a change together. Let's make a difference together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deribe, for your very inspiring words and for presenting the situation on the ground as we discuss this very important issue. Unfortunately, we have only 8 minutes left to go through our presentation, so we will have to be very brief because in these 8 minutes we would also like to answer a few questions. I see a lot of detailed questions coming through already, so as Elisa said, we will not be able to address many of those directly, but you can always write us and we will capture all the questions and try to get back to you afterwards. We will pick a few focus ones. So let me just go very quickly through the slides that we have for today. So one of the questions I already saw. I hope you can already see the next slide, is about the technology option considered for electricity and for cooking. So very briefly, electricity, you can define access in different tiers. We will not go through this in details, but the World Bank and other institutions have defined different tiers of energy access. So with a few watts of solar power, you can provide lighting and mobile phone charging. Going beyond that to a few hundred watts of solar PV capacity, you can start providing more services through what you call standalone solution solar home systems, where you can include refrigeration and other essential services in addition to lighting and mobile phone charging. Additional needs for infrastructural energy at the settlement level include, for instance, water pumping, where solar energy can help to store energy in the form of water elevated in tanks rather than into batteries, and then release the water to the refugees when necessary. So this has already been implemented in one of the camps that we assessed in Iraq, in Dar Shakran. And then, of course, the ideal solution that can provide full electricity access in a modular way to all, from offices to productive activities to households, is of course a renewable energy mini grid, where different components can play together to provide the optimal modern access to electricity. And of course, where there is access to grid electricity, which very often has issues in terms of reliability and affordability, installing renewables on site, although the grid is coming to the settlement, can improve the quality, the environmental impact, and the reliability, of course, of the supply. For cooking, there are many options, but of course, we could discuss electric cooking with all its challenges, but we wanted to focus, especially for the case of Ethiopia, as Dr. Gurmu explained today, ethanol and briquettes. So sustainably produced and processed biomass into liquid form or into solid form could address one of the key concerns, which is the protection of refugees when they go out in the community and in the neighboring areas from the settlement to collect traditional biomass, which is an environmental challenge and is also a potential source of safety and security concern for the refugees. Business models, again, in the interest of time, I will not go through much to the details, but the main idea here is to say that the partnership is a very important element where the private sector can come in with different solutions that do not require the institutions running the settlements to be experts in energy and become small utilities, but rather to purchase the services through power purchase agreements, lease to own arrangements, and other models. Or even at the refugee household level, there is the possibility of using such arrangements to be able to, for instance, lease to own or pay as you go models for solar lighting kits and solar home systems. So key findings before I hand it over for the last few slides to my colleague Akarshan. So energy situation for refugees very often reflect the development level and the energy situation of the host community. Brownouts and blackouts lead to over-reliance on expensive backup diesel generation, especially this is the case in Iraq. And lack of access to energy for cooking for refugees is a risk for conflict with host community in Ethiopia, as it was eloquently explained earlier. Large potential benefits arise from increasing the use of renewables in refugee settings, and lack of data is a starting point. So our assessment focused as a first step in acquiring the necessary data to do the analysis, because lack of data limits the efficiency in the use of electricity, but also is a barrier to move to renewables because you need to measure before you can decide. So I'll hand over for a few more detailed slides in the remaining minutes to my colleague Akarshan.
Thank you, Emanuele, and good morning, everyone. So this slide shows an overview of the 4 refugee settlements that were assessed during the study. And the first settlement that was assessed is the Dar Shakran camp in Iraq. This camp is located in the Kurdish region of Iraq and opened in 2013 and currently hosts about 11,608 refugees. The second settlement in Iraq is also located in the Kurdish region of Iraq and is the Dumiz 1 and 2 settlements. And combined, they host 44,000 refugees, making them the largest settlement in Iraq. In Ethiopia, the 2 settlements that were assessed instead are the Sherkole and the Tsore camps. Both of them are located near Asosa, near the border with Sudan. And Sherkole has around 10,619 refugees, while the Tsore refugee settlement has around 14,153. The pie charts that you see on the bottom right show the electricity consumption in both settlements in Ethiopia. And as you can see, most of the consumption for Tsore comes from the boreholes, while for Sherkole, the boreholes, the UNHCR office, and the community kitchen. Next slide, please. So after the detailed energy assessments that were carried out during the missions, the following recommendations were identified for improving the energy situation in the settlements in Iraq. The first is that of improving energy efficiency at the settlements. This includes advising refugees on ways to insulate houses, to reduce energy use for heating and cooling. Second recommendation is that of continuing to install renewable energy systems at the community and support facilities. This includes, for example, installing solar systems at boreholes, using solar plus battery storage for medical centers where voltage fluctuations can damage medical equipment, or also using solar plus battery systems at the coordination and registration offices. The third recommendation for the settlements in Iraq is that of discussing with the local government to increase the capacity of the transformer in the Dar Shakran settlement, because during our missions, it was found out that the 10 megawatt transformer is not sufficient. And in order to avoid these voltage fluctuations, it is recommended to increase the capacity to 16 megawatts. The fourth recommendation is that of installing renewable power plants on the feeder lines. And this, for example, includes installing a grid-tied 6.5 megawatt solar PV plant in Dumiz 1 and a grid-tied 2.5 megawatt solar PV plant in Dumiz 2. And these two proposed systems can be seen on the top right figure. And on the bottom figure, you can see a bird's eye view of the powerhouse and available space for these installations. The fifth recommendation is that of facilitating for any investments in infrastructure for the refugee settlement to take place in ways that can reduce UNHCR's technical financial risk. So this means, for example, using power purchase agreements where UNHCR can specify the amount of electricity that needs to be delivered without being required to provide the technical specs of the plant or the investment required to cover the installation. And the final recommendation for the settlements in Iraq is that of pushing for meters to be installed at households in the Dumi settlements and for refugees to pay for this electricity similarly to the host community on a kilowatt-hour basis. Next slide, please. For the settlements in Ethiopia, the first recommendation is that of promoting fuel-efficient cook stoves, which can reduce fuel consumption for cooking by 30%. And the second recommendation is that of transitioning to a market-based approach for biomass for cooking. This includes, for example, using cook stoves that use ethanol or briquettes. And as mentioned previously, the settlements in Ethiopia rely highly on firewood, which can be damaging for the health, and not only for the environment, but also for the health and safety and well-being of the refugees. And the third recommendation for Ethiopia is that of scaling up forest plantations and rehabilitate the land near the settlements. When it comes to energy access, instead, it is recommended to install a mini-grid. For example, 60 kilowatt solar plant with a 150 kilowatt hour battery bank system is estimated to decrease the diesel consumption in the Tsare camp by 60%. Also, for increasing energy access to the refugees, another recommendation is that of distributing solar lamps to the refugees so that they can have access to basic lighting and charging for their small appliances such as mobile phones or radios. And another recommendation for increasing energy access is also the use of solar streetlights. This can increase also the safety and well-being of women and children, especially during nighttime. And finally, it is recommended for the camps in Ethiopia to apply for a grid connection, which would allow for a possible sale of excess electricity from the mini-grid to the Ethiopian electric power. Next slide, please. So therefore, in conclusion, more detailed data needs to be collected to support decision-making on energy-related questions, and energy loggers are essential for humanitarian organizations in order to collect this detailed data and size appropriate renewable energy systems to provide clean, reliable, and cost-effective electricity to the refugees. And from the study, we've seen that in Iraq, transitioning to a meter-based payment system for the households can improve the availability and quality of electricity supply, while for Ethiopia, we have seen that collecting data on household income would be crucial in moving towards a market-based cash assistance. Finally, the study has shown how renewable energy is key in achieving energy access in humanitarian situations, and how agencies like IRENA can collaborate with organizations like UNHCR in providing clean energy access to refugees. Thank you for listening, and Elisa, over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Gurmu, Emmanuel, and Akarshan for this very insightful presentation. Let me go directly to the questions because we're running out of time. We have already received several ones, and thank you for all of them. Let me start with this one, and this goes to our IRENA colleagues. Why is this work on renewable energy solutions for refugee camps important, and why is IRENA engaging in it?
Thank you, Elisa, and thank you very much for being still here with us. We're a few minutes late, so we will try to be as brief as possible and take a few questions. And sorry for those that will not be answered on the spot. So why this is important? Well, the 70 million displaced people are the first reason why this is important. And the energy access agenda is a very significant role in situations of displacement, even more emphasized by the challenges on the ground that Dr. Gurmu explained us today so eloquently. So why IRENA is engaged? Because it's really looking at the synergies between an agency like UNHCR, which has a mandate on protection, and an agency like IRENA that has a global mandate to promote and support countries in their energy transition.
Thank you, Manuele. I think we have time for maybe a couple more. Another question, what is the role of innovation in energy access scenarios? For instance, solar peer-to-peer grids for dense settlements and refugee camp as a hub for innovation.
Thank you. So this is a very relevant topic in the sense that IRENA's work on innovation really defines innovation not only as technology, but all the business models and the systemic innovation more in general that needs to be around innovation for it to be successful. So we mentioned very briefly the business models. Pay as you go is an interesting model where really you could see how the innovation in technology brings to the market very affordable, very small and very capable solar lanterns with mobile phone charging, which were not available a few years ago. And these can be delivered at very low cost through models that can be accessible in terms of payment also to refugees that have, for instance, a very small amount of cash available at hand through different mechanisms, through UNHCR and other mechanisms like small private sector development in the camp. Instead of purchasing the hardware, they could purchase a service at a few dollars a month or less. And I think this is one of the many examples. We could discuss longer, but in the interest of time, I just wanted to highlight this one that I think is very nice in terms of mixing technological innovation, business model innovation, and systemic innovation in this context.
Thank you, Manuele. Maybe another one. What is your opinion about using modular, adaptable renewable energy power supply system approach in temporary settlement?
Thank you. I think this is a very important element and where renewables can be particularly suited and flexible in this context. So one of the things we found out is that diesel generators expecting a demand growth over time are essentially oversized and they stay so. And as a result, they're very inefficient and they suffer from technical failures more often than necessary. While in the case of renewables, modularity, especially solar PV and battery storage, are extremely modular technologies that could allow you to go and, let's say, climb the tiers of energy access from basic lighting all the way up to a fully fledged mini grids. So the fact that the settlement is temporary is a concern for long-term investments, but at the same time, some of the temporary settlements have been there for decades. So the fact that you can start with modular small-scale technology and go up as the demand grows in a gradual way, and that you can combine this with business models that do not require UNHCR and partners to invest in the systems, but are rather to purchase the services. If at one point the camp is not there anymore, the technologies can be easily relocated. A lot of these can be containerized and moved to another location. So really the partnership with the private sector that knows all the technologies and business models is crucial to make sure that the challenge of the temporality of the camp is not a challenge for moving towards renewables.
Thank you, Manuele. Unfortunately, the time is up. So many insightful questions to choose from. Let me thank today's speakers for their captivating presentation and very pertinent questions that we received from the audience. We hope that the insights of our colleagues are of great value to all of you. A couple of final announcements. To be able to reflect on the delivery of our webinar and ways to improve it, we would appreciate your feedback. We would like to invite you to complete a very short satisfactory survey, which will appear at the end of the webinar, and which will be shared with you in the follow-up email. Thank you in advance. And last but not least, we would like to invite you all to our next edition of this webinar series on oceans powering the energy transition. It will take place in 2 weeks on the 12th of May at 10 a.m. CET. You can already register on the IRENA website, and the link will be again shared with you in our follow-up email. Once again, we thank you all for attending this webinar session. Goodbye and see you soon.